So let's talk about tube versus tubeless tires. And I've got one of each here. So a tube tire is your traditional approach, which is you got your wheel, usually, not always, there'll be rim tape in there. There's a tube, we all seen these before, and a tire. And no matter which approach, whether it's tube or tubeless, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to keep air under pressure inside the tire. So with a tube, obviously they're using the tube to keep the air in. And yeah, simple. If you ever break down, you just replace your tube. Check first if there's anything in your tire, but that's a tube tire. A tubeless is not a new technology, it's been around a long time. You have your tire, your rim, but instead of a tube, you fill it with, well, not fill it, but you put a certain amount of tubeless sealant in. Now, this works like blood. So let's say if you get your cut in your hand, it starts to bleed a bit, then it kind of congeals and it stops. It works very similar. So this tubeless sealant, when it starts to get forced out through a hole, it starts to congeal, and then there's bits of there's bits of like carbon or in various ones, and that can stop it. So with a tubeless wheel, you got your tire, you got a special valve, you still need a valve to pump it, and you've got your tubeless compatible tires. Now it'll be written on them. So for example, this one here, it says TLR, so tubeless ready. Not every tire works in tubeless because the tire needs to be, it can't be porous. Some of traditional tires, they're porous because the tubes keeps the air in. You need special tubeless tires that are basically waterproof, if you will, and the tubeless sealant won't actually leak out the actual carcass of the tire itself. So the end result is the same. We've got two wheels here with tires. They're both pumped up, and I can go cycling. There's pros and cons with each. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. There's enough forums on fire and WhatsApp groups on fire with people arguing about which is best. I have some opinions, but you can't really go wrong with either. I'll talk about pros and cons of your your tubed tire. This is the traditional kind of approach. So pros is it's simple. You got your tire on, you got the tube in there, and when you want to go on a spin, you can bring a couple of tubes. If you break down, you just replace your tube. This has been around a while. If you run out of tubes, you can get into a shop, or I do it myself in bike packing, bring a little tubeless or tube repair, bicycle repair kit, and you can fix the holes. So still ideal, a lot of people still use it. If you're using narrower tires, then it's probably better. Come to that, if you want to run higher pressures, so traditionally higher pressure you would use tube, and the reason for that is the tubeless sealant, if you do get a hole, if there's super high pressure in and it's a large hole, it'll all just get blown out the hole. So pros is it's just simple, it's just tubes and a tire, and that's it. The cons is that any sort of like tiny hole, torn piece of wire, anything that pierces the internal tube, and you got a slow puncture, or if it's a bigger one, you're immediately flat. And if you get a puncture and you put your tube in and you don't check and something happens, you could get another puncture and another one, and any hole in your tube, and then you're back to square one again. That's probably the cons, is if you're unlucky or there's something in the tire and you can't find it, you continually get punctures. Let's talk about tubeless. So this is actually, I've set up as a gravel tyre, but I have road tyres as well. So the pros of this is, and I'm not going to do it because but if I was to get a pin, like or nail, and pierce this tyre, I need to spin it so that the sealant can move around. But if I pierce this tyre, within seconds that will seal. And I've had this happen in events. I was doing, for example, Orwell 300 there last year, and it was only 15k in, and a guy behind me says, "Hey, I think you got a puncture," because you could see the sealant coming out. And I just kept pedaling, and 30 seconds later, problem fixed itself without even stopping. I've had a couple examples of that where the tube will seal itself, or the tyre will seal itself, and this is the pros of this, the fact that like it'll seal itself. You can also run lower pressures because there's no danger of what they call a pinch flat. So a pinch flat, if we go back to my tube tyre, is where you hit a pothole and the force will push the tyre in and actually catch off the rim, your tube, and basically give it a snake bite type. If you see two holes in your tube when you puncture, it means you had a pinch flat where the tube was pinched against the rim of the wheel. And with tubeless you don't have that problem because there's no tube to pinch. So you can run lower pressures, which means for long distance that can mean a bit more comfort. For the likes of gravel it means you can have lower pressure, better traction. So that's a pro. The disadvantages of tubeless is when it goes catastrophically wrong, it's messy. So this tyre, as I said, has got an amount of sealant in it. And let's say I break down and it will not seal, and you take off the tyre, it's a mess. And then you got to put in the tube in, and it's just a mess. It's also not that easy. It's like if you buy a new tyre and you put a tube in it, anybody can do it. All you need is your tyre levers. Just be careful you don't pinch the tube, but anybody can do that. Tubeless is different. I'm actually going to show in this video what it takes to mount a tubeless tyre. It's not that straightforward. Maybe I'm making it complicated. Maybe some of you will say, hey, there's a much easier way. That's fine. I just go by what I know works. Out of the disadvantages, once you get your tyres seated, like the bead seated, and you get your sealant in and it seals, you're off to the races. So the main problem is if you have a major breakdown and you have to take the tyre off, big problem. Well, it's not a big problem, but it's very, very messy. Another thing with this is kind of a pro, or maybe some might see it as a con, but if you do get a puncture with a tubeless and it's just not sealing, like it just keeps in a way bleeding out, you can put in a plug. I have some here, and a plug is, and it's the same way to fix a car tyre. So a plug is where these are kind of expensive ones. Actually, I've used quite a few of them. I think I may need to order more. Good job, I checked. Yeah, I have one here. Actually, I'm down to no, I'm okay, I have two left. Anyways, the idea of these plugs is that if you got a major hole, let's say here, you can push in the plug and it basically fills it with a sticky rubbery type material. Let's put it back into its holder, and then you pull back out the tool, and that sticky rubbery material remains behind, and you have fixed the hole. So I remember last year again, I was doing the Connect Extreme 600, about 50 kilometers in, got a pretty nasty puncture, popped in one of those guys, and I completed the event without actually having to take the tyre off. It was a 600 kilometer event, so they're very effective. So you can get cheaper ones, but that works quite well. That's probably a pro, is the fact that you can fix a hole in a tire without taking the wheel off at all. And again, I have experience to tell me that that's a long-term fix. So that's as it, you wouldn't have to pick one over the other. I would say for tubeless, you do need to use a bigger tire. I wouldn't use tubeless on a tire size less than 30 mil. Like 13 above is fine. And the reason for that is I found that there's too much pressure in the tire, so using smaller tires, bigger pressure, it doesn't give the sealant a chance to fix the hole. So I've run like 30 mil tires on my bike I use for Audax events, and use tubeless, and it works. I find it works really well for me. On my road bike, let's say my racer bike, I have 28 mil tires, and I use tubes in those. That's just my preference. I'm sure there's many of you out there will say that tubeless works all sizes. I just know myself, when getting a puncture, if it's high pressure, I just find the sealant just leaks out so quickly, it doesn't give it a chance to seal. Okay, so for this video, we're going to fit this section in the video, we're going to fit a tire, a tubeless tire to a rim. Now this happens to be it's a mountain bike tire, but the same principle applies to pretty much any tubeless setup. So before I get started, one of the kind of tips I'll give you with fitting tubeless is it's crucial that the bead, so the area here around the edge of the rim, that's where the bead of the tire sits in, make sure that's clean. So this is not a brand new wheel, and so I'm going to check, because if there's dirt or something gets caught between the tire and the rim itself, that can be a place for a sealant to leak out. So I'm going to check both sides, and this looks pretty clean to me. The next step, got it here. Next thing I'll do here is I'll take out the valve core. So you'll see why after a few minutes, but I want to be able to get air in as quickly as possible, because the secret to getting a tubeless tire to fit is to get the bead to pop into the rim as quickly as possible, because that'll form a seal. So by taking out the core, it'll allow me to get air in quicker. Another tip, if it's a brand new wheel setup, when you're putting in a valve, there's a kind of a rubber end here, and that sits into the rim, and you got to make sure that's clean as well, and make sure it's tight, but don't over tighten it, just so that it's a good snug fit. And it's amazing how many times a tubeless wheel setup, loses air, and it's because it's coming out around the valve. So clean, fit, tighten. I'm not sure what torque, but don't over tighten it. Like you maybe use pliers, but only 1 or 2 turns. So that's that piece done. Now next step is to mount the wheel, mount the tire. And I'm sure this is a directional tire like they all are. Let me just get the direction here. This is while I'm doing this as well, I pointed out, as I look around here for the direction, I'm also checking the bead of the tire. This is the crucial bead of the tire here. You want to make sure that's as clean as possible. There's no lumps of old sealant sitting on that, because if it's going to fail, it's going to fail around the bead. So this tire turns this way, So I will pop it on this way here. And this one isn't too bad to fit, it's a big mountain bike tyre. So next step is actually, unlike a tube where you'll be putting this in, we're actually going to fully mount the tyre on the rim. Okay, so that's now on. Next step, and this is where you can use a track pump, but I think it can be difficult. But I'm actually going to use a small compressor. So down here, got a small Aldi compressor. It's actually quite old now, but it still does the job. Let's get that. And I have one of these guys, which is just an air nozzle. So what I'm going to do is get air in at high pressure as possible. So again, I have to valve core out. And just make sure it sits in. And you hear that bang? That tells me that the bead has popped into place. Okay, so I can now let the pressure go, because that tyre, as you can, it's probably hard to see in the video, but that tyre is now sticking, almost sticking to the wall of the rim. Okay, so that's that done. Now I'm going to put some sealant in, and let me pause for a second. I'll stop the video, I'll be back to you shortly. I'm going to show how we can, now that we have the tyre on, how do we actually get the sealant in. So, okay, so let me get a bit closer up with this. How we get sealant in is one of these, so it's a syringe. So I can basically pull sealant in, put the connector on, and then push sealant in through the valve. Or the valve used to be. So steps are syringe some sealant in, okay, and then attach, and then we need to do this a few times. Now there's some of you out there may be laughing at me because I'm not actually measuring exact amounts, but I kind of know myself how much stuff I need. You need a decent amount. I mean, you're not going to save a huge amount of weight from a tyre or from a tube, so you still have to put in a reasonable amount of sealant. So I'm going to do this size tyre probably 5 times, I'd say. I'm not going to bore you with all that, so I'll continue on here. Okay, so I have filled my tyre with enough sealant, and the next step is to put the valve core back in. Now if you're reusing a valve core, you want to make sure, and this one isn't great, so I'm actually going to replace the valve core. What happens is the sealant can kind of gum up the treads and just makes it, it's just not as good putting in an old one. Usually you can reuse them. I've got some spare valve cores here. So let me just grab one. Hopefully this will fit. Nice new valve core. So we just screw our valve core back in. And then we tighten. Now again, you don't need to over tighten this because you'll destroy the actual piece of rubber. So just make it, reasonably tight. Okay. So that's the valve core in. Next, we're going to pump. So just jump to that shortly. Okay, next step. I've just attached the valve core in, tightened. I've just attached my track pump here, and there's no air in the tyre yet. So I'm going to start pumping, and this is where, for most people, tubeless goes completely wrong, because haven't, the bead of the tyre is not popped in. There's dirt in the way. There's something wrong with the tube. I see, I have no problem here. It's immediately taking air. Let me just check my pressure here, because this is not like I don't want to put too much in. Just going to put 25. Okay, it's done. Remove the pump. There's a bit of a fiddle here because I'm trying to balance the pump on the floor. That's done. Close up our valve. There we go. And that's it. No problem. The secret to that, I don't want to call it a secret, but I think the trick to that there was to use in my case, use the compressor to get the bead, just clean up the excess, and I'm just checking here, make sure, because especially a new tyre being fitted, if you see bubbling around the bead, it may be that it just didn't seat properly. Sometimes you just have to leave it for a bit. It's just sealing up. It might just take a bit and come back later on and put a bit more air in. But that is a tyre now fitted, tubeless tyre fitted. If I was to get a puncture with this one now, it should seal itself. And actually, when I took that tyre off, it's full of holes and that has been sealed. You can tell because inside the tyre you'll find a kind of like a kind of a lump of dried sealant where it sealed the hole. And it's just, I won't say it's simple as that. I've had to use a compressor here, but if you have a really, really good track pump that can send in a lot of pressure, or in my case use a compressor, makes the job a lot easier. So that's a tubeless tyre now set up and ready to roll. I think that's, so summary on tube versus tubeless. Tube, a great option, not knocking it, still using myself on my road bike. Tubeless, I think it for the slightly wider tyre, 30mm or above, can run slightly lower pressure. It will save you, like I've many examples where I've been punctured and it just fixed itself. You just keep going, no need to even stop. Disadvantage is like with tubes, you could be bad luck with something in your tyre, keep getting punctured, you run out of tubes. You only can keep air in so long as you have a good tube. With tubeless, so the pros is the sealing and everything else. The cons is when it goes wrong, it'll go really wrong. Mess, dirt in the, it's just a complete mess, and it can be really frustrating if you buy new tyres and you put them on and you cannot get the tyre to seal. It's a mess, and yeah, it just can be a mess when things go wrong. So it's not like, tubes, it can be hard at times maybe to get the lever on the tyre, but like with a tubeless tyre, when that goes wrong and the mess and stuff, yeah, some people just cannot deal with that. But I am a fan of tubeless and fan of tubed, so don't come to this video looking for the definitive answer. Just kind of, there's pros and cons of both. But anyways, that's today's video.